A lot of people ask the question, well, why did Jesus have to die?
Jesus died so that we can have new life, to bring us into a relationship with God. It's sometimes called the atonement. I mean, that word was created by William Tyndale when he was translating the Bible in the 16th century, and there wasn't a word in English that could really encapsulate what the Bible meant, so he came up with this term, at-one-ment. But even just that term doesn't sum it up enough, and there's so much going on the cross. Different people have emphasized different aspects. Some people point to the example that it is of God's love for us, Jesus' love in dying for us. And that's sometimes called the moral exemplar approach to the atonement. Others emphasize what is happening. Jesus is taking our sin on himself and paying the price for us as a substitute, what's sometimes called substitutionary atonement, that kind of concept of what's going on. Others say, well, look, the result of this, of course, is that Jesus conquers sin and the devil, and we're set free. And that's an approach called Christus Victor. For me personally, I think all of those are true. They're different aspects of this great thing that Jesus died for us, demonstrating God's love, bearing our sin so that we can be forgiven, and setting us free to live a new life in a relationship with him.
I want you to imagine that when I was on honeymoon with my wife in Thailand, we were swimming along in the ocean, and I said to her, "Darling, I love you so much that I'm going to drown myself to demonstrate my love for you." Now, we were only barely married, so even at that stage I don't think my wife would have been happy that I was going to do that. There is no way that would help to demonstrate love. It just demonstrates that I'm crazy. But if, as we were swimming along in that ocean, I see a dorsal fin coming towards us, and then I decide, wife, run for the shore, swim as fast as you can, I'll deal with the shark, and in the process I'm killed. That's a different kind of love, isn't it, that's demonstrated. My dying actually accomplishes something.
It's actually God saying, I really love you. This is how much I love you. I'll give my son to die for you. It's also the fact that he dies in my place, because if I don't have someone dies for my sin, then I have to pay the penalty myself.
He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you've been healed.
When Jesus dies on the cross, he deals with an enemy that we've got. We've got a problem of sin, and only by dying in our place, suffering the punishment that we deserve, is Jesus able to forgive us and free us from sin.
Because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you've been saved.
Jesus said on one occasion, if the Son sets you free, you will be really free. And I think you kind of have to ask the questions, what is freedom all about? And I think that freedom is a basic concept that we strive after as human beings and generally don't find. And you find people bound up with habit and vice and drug abuse and alcohol abuse, all that kind of thing. We find people bound up in relationships that don't seem to work. We find kids bound up in drug culture and knife culture and all that kind of thing. Desperately sad places for them to be. And yet the Jesus comes and says, I want you to be free. Free to be something, not free to have rules and regulations put on you, but free to be what God meant you to be. And that is to be a child of God, to know that you're loved, to know that there's security, to know that actually you've got a God there who puts his arms around us and says, come on, it's going to be all right, we can do this journey thing together.
Every Sunday when I come to say the peace, when we share the peace with each other, either with my American Army congregation in Baghdad or with my Iraqi congregation, my biggest congregation, I say, Christ has reconciled us to God and to each other by his death on the cross. We meet in his name to share in his peace. And everything we do in the field of reconciliation, and the way I spend so much of my time dealing with terrorists and dealing with bad people, really bad people, it ultimately, for me, comes back to the cross.